Well, if you want to do that, perfect. All right. Um, I also want to just say you're welcome to be on camera. It makes it a little bit more interactive, but you certainly do not have to. You're welcome to just listen in. We do ask that all of our participants stay muted until it's time for our question and answer, but feel free to use the chat box. Ask questions, share comments. We will do our best to address those as we're able to answer the questions. We would love to know who's here. If you want to add your name, location, age of your kids in the chat, any maybe specific questions you have, that would be wonderful to see. I also want to note that we're going to be doing a poll to get your feedback. We'll do that around 1:45. That is our way of really getting a sense of the experience for you. This is required by our funders, so we are able to continue offering these parent panels for free. So please complete that poll and share your feedback with us at that time. Before we begin, I want to just share a little bit about the Ryan Bartel Foundation for those of you who might not be familiar. For those of you joining today, excuse me. We're an organization that focuses on upstream teen suicide prevention. Our ultimate goal is empowering teens, parents, caregivers, families, building resilience, and really helping improve mental wellness. We offer a number of youth programs, including the Fort Teen Hangout, which is our weekly support group. We also have a mental wellness workshop series for middle school students. And our signature program, the Fort, is a monthly experiential mental wellness event where teens really get to connect with one another, do fun activities like yoga, knitting, interacting with therapy dogs, all centered around building coping skills and their resilience. All of our programs are listed on our website with the registration information. So we encourage you to check those out and sign your teens up for some of our upcoming programs. We also offer parent and caregiver education. This program today, our Fortitude Parent Panel, is part of a series that we do frequently. And today's topic, excuse me, I've already had a busy day, really centers around peer pressure. We know how important it is for our young people to have connections with their peers, but sometimes, right, we kind of wonder, is this healthy? What's going on with my child? And so we have a great group of panelists joining us today to really answer some of those questions. This has been a topic that has been many of you in our parent community have asked us to cover this topic because we know it's just so important. And so really excited to have three amazing panelists with us to share their expertise. And our moderator, Dr. Cam Caswell, is an adolescent psychologist and one of the Ryan Bartel Foundation board members. I am going to turn it over to you, Dr. Cam, and look forward to listening into our panel. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Lacey. Yes, I am Dr. Cameron Caswell, and I am local here in Ashburn and work with parents and their teenagers to help them understand one another, because I know that that's always challenging. I'm a mom of a teenager too, so I live this every day. And I was saying, I even had a whole interaction with my daughter today. She got really pissed off at me, and I was sharing that. So I'm living this every single day with you guys. So I wanted to take a chance and let our three experts introduce themselves. Mary, you are right to my right on my screen. So I'm going to start with you. Go ahead, Mary.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Rogers Kirby. I'm very happy to be here. I'm a licensed professional counselor and owner and therapist at Creating Solutions, an all virtual private practice. I've been working with youth for close to 20 years. Can't believe that, in various settings, from clients' homes to public behavioral health to private practice. The majority of my career has been working with adolescents with substance abuse and co-occurring disorders. In my practice, I work with ages 12 and up, focusing on issues like anxiety, trauma, and mood disorders.
Thank you so much, Mary. Lily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Lily. I am a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm currently working in private practice for Ellie Mental Health Ashburn. I'm seeing clients both in person and virtually. And then before that, I worked in a variety of different levels of care. I worked at like inpatient hospitalization. I worked in partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient, all for adolescents. So I've done a lot of work with adolescents in various stages of crisis, stability, and working to support their parents as well was a big one.
Thank you, Lily. And Larry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Larry Koznov. I am a professional life coach. I'm based here in San Francisco, but I coach virtually all over the country. I work with high school teens and college students a lot around lack of confidence, lack of motivation, technology addictions, and things of that nature. And I've been doing this for about 5 years now, and I've coached over 300 teens. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about peer pressure.
This is great. So we've got a well-rounded group of people that are going to answer a lot of questions. I'm going to do a quick little intro and then we're going to just dive in. I'm going to remind you guys there's a chat here. If you have any questions, I'm going to be watching the chat. Val's going to be watching the chat. So we want to answer your questions. If you do not want to make it public, you can directly message one of us and we will look at it. We won't share your name. But my guess is if you have a question, pretty much everyone else probably has a similar question, so please ask. We want to make sure we're addressing your needs and what you need. So it was interesting. Today I was just doing some research and I found one study that said that 75% of our teenagers' decisions are based off of peer pressure or impacted. And this comes from what they're wearing, what kind of mug. I have like all kinds of my, what kind of drink you have, right? What kind of water mug you have. I was trying to think of the name. Stanley, that's it. My daughter got me a Stanley, so I was cool too. To stealing and cheating and bullying and things like drugs and alcohol and sex and terrifying things. They're making decisions based on this. And we're going to talk a little bit to begin with, like why they are so susceptible to peer pressure. But it's really important to realize also that when we don't address peer pressure and they give into it, they actually are more likely to have serious mental health issues, self-confidence issues. It can lead to poor academic performance, distancing themselves from their family and friends. And when left untreated, it can even drive them to self-harm and suicidal thoughts. So that is why we have gathered this incredible panel together, because we want to provide you some practical tips, some evidence-based strategies to really help you and your team navigate peer pressure together. And that's the key. We're going to do this together because we're not going to be able to fight against it, right? This is a team effort. So with that, we're going to jump in. And the first question I want to ask the panelists, and Lily, you're there. I'm going to start with you. We're going to start with just defining, what do we mean by peer pressure? What exactly is that, and how do we recognize that our kids' decisions are based or informed by peers?
Sure. Well, peer pressure, I'm going to do my very best to not be like my adolescent clients and answer not using the words in the definition, is when we are making decisions or choices based on what the people around us are doing or what we see other people doing. And I think often when we think of peer pressure, it's like you're saying in a more negative context where if we see other people, we see our friends cheating in a certain class, maybe that's more socially acceptable for us because we see other people doing it, or around us stealing, you mentioned. And I know we're focusing on adolescents today, but I even think about it like social media influencers. That's like a monetized form of peer pressure. So if that helps you think about it in a better, more universal context, that's a good metaphor that I like to think about it with.
Lily, that's a big one. And we're going to get back to social media too, because I know just for myself, I see a lot of my daughter's impact on what she wears and what she does and the words, the music, all of that is impacted by influencers, right? That is, they're kind of telling you what's cool. So that's a big piece of this. Mary, what do you have to add to that?
I think that's the thing, is there's so many different types of peer pressure. I think traditionally we think of peer pressure as somebody saying something or forcing somebody into something, whereas peer pressure can be very indirect as well. And I think that is where we see a lot of the social media being much more of that indirect source of peer pressure, because it might not be directly towards that person, but if they happen to see or consume these different posts or what they're looking at on social media, it can be kind of indirect as well.
Yeah. And Larry, when we look at peer pressure, I think it's hard to know too, because kids are also trying to figure out who they are at this time and defining themselves. So how much of this is peer pressure versus peer influence of trying to figure out, hey, I like that. That's something I like too. How do we know when it's a positive or negative form of influence?
Yeah, that's a tough one because they're trying to form their identity at that age. So they're trying a lot of things. I like what you mentioned around peer pressure can go both ways, can also be, positive. I run a lot of group coaching with teens that are all struggling with the same thing. And when one of them steps outside of their comfort zone and gets positive result, it also influences positively the other ones, right? So they have that space. So, and actually up until now, I hadn't thought about peer pressure in that positive light, to be honest. So I appreciate this conversation. It's good.
I did a lot of group therapy at, especially at inpatient partial hospitalization. IOP group therapy is the modality. And I think that works specifically well with adolescents for, Larry, the exact reasons that you're saying, is because they are so influenced by peers. Like I could tell a client, have you tried these coping skills? And it goes in one ear out the other. But if a peer says the exact same thing, recommends the exact same coping skills, they're like, oh no, I haven't tried that. Maybe I should give that a shot.
Yeah.
I love this because now we're going, okay, peer pressure, let's look at this as this could be a tool for parents to help encourage their kids to do the things that are more healthy, right? As well. So this is a good thing to keep in mind. So let's dig a little bit into why teens are so susceptible to peer pressure. Why is this such a big deal? Mary, do you want to go first?
Sure. A big part of it honestly goes into their brains. So, our adolescent brains are not fully developed. Their reward system is primed at this point in time, so that they're looking for experiences that are going to give them reward. And the prefrontal cortex, so the front part of our brain, that we use to weigh decisions, think ahead, think about consequences, that's not fully developed yet. So we have a mixture of a person who's primed for reward and doesn't have the ability as well to kind of think about what they're doing. And so basically, rewards are some of those riskier behaviors that you might see, or the things that you kind of not so sure about your team doing. They're just more primed to, they want those experiences. They want to get that dopamine hit basically for them. And immediacy is incredibly important to them as well. Like they want the immediacy, they want the feedback, they want that instant gratification. Right out. And so that's why they engage in so much of these more risky behaviors and are more susceptible to that pressure, because they can't quite think maybe 3 or 4 steps ahead. And in a way, the more risky, the higher the reward you might get in the brain. And there's also a biological component to it. We as we developed as a society, we were very reliant on other people to survive. And so teens are looking around at their peer group, and there's a sense of like, I need to connect with these people. I need to be accepted by these people. Otherwise, like this isn't good. Because way back when, if you weren't connected with others, you basically were going to die. Like you were not going to survive. So there's a very deep biological component to it as well.
Yeah. Lily, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Mary, I love how you tie things back to science, because I also try and do that for, when I'm understanding something, it helps me, better think about it, better conceptualize it. So this is something that I learned in, grad school, undergrad, and psychology classes. There's different stages of development. That's kind of a theory of human development. And adolescents are in kind of the identity versus role confusion stage of development. So I think we mentioned previously, right? Like they're exploring different parts of their identity. And as they're doing that, oftentimes it's going to be influenced by the people around them. And since kids are at school most of the day, they're going to be around their peers a lot more than they are generally around other groups of people.
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what's been said. There's such a a need that teens have to belong, to be within group, to connect with others, and the peer pressure is an easy way to just follow that they can just kind of come in and belong. And they're in such search of their identity that it's all about belonging, connection. And also, I think the part of it is too, is that at that age, at least the teens that I work with, they don't know fully who they are. They haven't explored that. So they don't have conviction about who they are, what they want. And so they're just susceptible to a lot of pressure at that age. Right? Somebody who would be older, who knows who they are, have explored that, has that experience, wouldn't be so.
So there is no way for parents to step in and go, don't be influenced by your peers. And I think we want to do that, right? We go in and lecture them, tell them they're making bad decisions, and that's going to have zero impact because it does not matter what we say. It's not going to overcome their need to belong and their need for all of these risks. You know, they love that risky behavior and that feeling. So let's start here. How do we as parents start to protect our kids against negative? We want to push them toward positive. How do we protect them from negative peer pressure when it's so innately needed and they're driven by it? So Larry, let's continue with you. I know you have something to say about like, how do we start that?
Yeah, I think it all starts with connection, right? Because if you're talking with your teen, they're not going to hear you if you're not connected with them. Like if you come in right away and just say, you know, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, it doesn't even register. So making sure that you're connected with them so that if you're connected, you can actually positively influence them. If it's just you're using strictly authority, for example, that's not going to work, and it'll drive the behavior underground and you won't have any influence anyways.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The other one is really, instead of monitoring, I would say switch to a mentoring approach. So become really curious about the content that your teens are, for example, watching on social media. Really understand what that's about and what's the underlying need behind that they have for exploring that content. So those are sort of kind of the ways.
Those are really big. And we talk about this connection. And I know with a lot of the parents I work with, that's a tough one because they're trying to connect and they're not succeeding at connecting. They feel like my teen wants nothing to do with me. So if we're in this situation, what do we start to do to connect with our kids?
I think a really easy way to start is with what they're into, with what their hobbies are, with what they like, rather than saying, hey, like, I mean, they might be receptive to, hey, let's go, you know, watch a football game together. But if they're not into sports, that's not gonna, they're gonna be like, oh, my family wants to do something with me again. So figuring out if they're, you know, into books, you know, what are you reading? What is it about? And questioning always can be, you know, iffy also with teens. So it has to be just not something that you're coming into asking rapid fire questions, being like, oh, I've seen that book, you know, on, for example, like I saw it in a newspaper article, or I saw it, you know, they're talking about it, you know, on the radio this morning. I've been curious. People seem to like it. You know, how are you liking it? Should I read it? You know, try and make it not so much just the what questions. But yeah, I find figuring out what they're into to build the understanding and then also create some kind of room for connection there.
I love that. And Mary, can you help us with, because Lily was mentioning this, and I think this is a really challenging one, is how to show curiosity without coming across as interrogating or protecting ourselves from them interpreting us as being critical or judgmental or setting a trap.
Mm-hmm. I think it really does have to do with that, coming in with that sense of curiosity and wondering. So you don't label things as good or bad. It's just more about that. I'm curious or I'm wondering. And that can be helpful in the conversation. So it doesn't feel like, yes, you're interrogating them. And, you know, pick where you have these conversations. So you don't want to just all of a sudden start rapid fire questioning them. Sometimes, often it is good to start having some of those types of conversations more so like if you are doing an activity together, like Lily was saying, especially if it's an activity that, you know, the teen wants to do. And that can feel like a little more of a natural segue into some of these conversations. And I mean, it is really about that's just coming at it with a sense of curiosity.
Yeah. There's a question in here, and it really leads right into where we were going. That is, she's got an 11, I'm saying she, it might be he, 11-year-old and an 8-year-old. That is there anything they can do to mold their view of peer pressure before the teen years, which I think really leads into how do we start this conversation with our kids? And yes, the earlier the better, about peer pressure and what that is.
Think it can be easy to start with yourself as a model, especially when they're younger. I mean, any, you know, child, adolescent are going to be influenced by modeling. Adolescents might like to think that they're not or pretend that they're not, but especially kids, right? So you can model, like if you're scrolling through social media, you know, oh, that influencer is, you know, talking about this really cool product. Let me go research it before I buy it and see, you know, or like, hey, do you want to help like look this up? I'm looking for a birthday present or a Christmas present. And I saw, you know, someone recommend this. Let's go look at some other reviews, kind of model how like that, those critical thinking skills, or and using yourself as an example or using something that, you know, the kid's interested in to say, here's how you recognize that, you know, someone is trying to pressure you into something, and then critically thinking, is this something that actually is what's being advertised?
And I would add that the, you know, your own personal experiences, like everybody has experienced peer pressure, so you can share your own experiences with your child, or even draw from if you're watching a movie together or a TV show, or it comes up like that, or something where you all see an example basically together, or you can even bring it up that you saw as just another way of tying in examples so that they kind of get a sense of what it is.
Yeah, I would say, you know, starting the conversations early, even at a dinner table, because even as an adult, I still feel peer pressure, you know, every day, whether I'm at, you know, a restaurant or I'm meeting other parents and influencing my choices. So you can have a conversation around the dinner table, I think at a pretty young age with them. Yeah, sooner the better.
Let's talk about I think the angle that we want to take too, because I know especially when they become teens and we start talking about peer pressure, they start receiving it as, oh, you think I'm stupid, or you don't think I'm not standing up for myself, or I don't know any better. How do we approach it in a way that makes them more open to understanding what that influence is and how we might not recognize when we're being influenced?
I think, you know, doing your research as a parent, because, you know, evaluating risk, like what's a real risk, what's not, because they have, you know, their own research based on their peers and what they think. So coming to the table with your own research and not just an opinion, and also sort of the sooner you can sort of negotiate the relationship with them, you know, that you're not just using authority, but you're sort of empowering them and their opinion matters, and what they think matters, then and treat them as an equal, you'll be able to influence them more. They'll be able to hear you a lot more than if you're just not doing that, not negotiating and just imposing.
And to go off with that, Larry, I think it's about coming in a non-judgmental way. Basically, you have to be careful about, even if it's something you don't agree with or you're not so sure about, that you don't label it as like a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah,
And all I was going to add was that with that non-judgmental kind of nature, I think a lot of that comes from maybe a more angle of curiosity, like we were going off of before.
Oh, I think she froze a little. I think too with the curiosity, and I know this is really difficult for parents when the things that they're like, and I see this a lot with like what kids are wearing. Let's go there. Let's do this one, because I see a lot of this where kids are wearing clothes that we would never have been caught dead in, or our parents would have allowed us to wear, and they feel great in it and they want to go out in it. So it's very counter to what we're comfortable with, but they're going, but this is what my friends wear. How do we address that type of dynamic?
I think some of this is that those conversations that you try to have earlier on and as they grow. I think one thing is important about exploring like value system, like what's valuable, what you believe in, even tying that into even kind of expectations with family and family values, as a way to start that kind of conversation so that they can, I think that's the matter of thinking between what do I like, what do I believe in compared to, and making that distinction between that and, and others.
Yeah, I would also say, there is some things that because there's a generational gap that are going to be different. And even as a parent, I think it's our job also to adapt. Like, so when there is real danger, yes, for sure. And then there's some things where it's like, is there really real danger? Or is that more of a preference? So that's also kind of a conversation within yourself to have.
Yeah, that's a tough one, isn't it? Definitely a tough one. Let's go now, and we know our kids' friends, and we've either know them or we've heard them talking about them, and we're like, we don't really like what we're hearing about what their friends are doing or saying, but they're our kids' friends. How do we approach that situation?
Mhm.
That's an easy one, right?
Yeah.
Part of it is exploring kind of maybe the and somewhat maybe even going back to how did this relationship or this friendship even begin, like the where it began, and understanding maybe what is it about this particular person that your teen has been drawn to or wants to be friends with. And if there are things that you're hearing about this friend that you're not liking, come in a way where it's asking questions about, well, what do you think about so and so, or what do you think about what they're doing? Instead of you saying, I don't like that. Basically, that's not how you want to start off that conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're sort of coming back to the curiosity, and really, if you're curious, then you're empowering your team to have an opinion, to really explain to you, to be a partner in the conversation. I think that's a good start.
It definitely is. And I think one of the things to be aware of, and then I want to go back to what you guys are thinking with this, is when we pit ourselves against their friends, we're not going to win, especially if we don't have a good connection with them. So now we're just disconnecting. So I think that curiosity is so important. But I think that being non-judgmental, and it's interesting, someone put this question in while I was asking it. So we're like right here. But the being non-judgmental part, when you are in your head extraordinarily judgmental, how do we do that? That's a tough one.
That's a really tough one, and so as a life coach for teens, often, I mean, I have training and things like that, but a lot of what I offer is just a judgment-free space for teens that they don't feel they get at home.
Yeah.
So, so that says a lot about their experience. And so I think parents, we all have a long ways to go in terms of regulating our judgments and expressing it.
And I think that's the thing, like internally, there might be certain things that you're feeling or thinking, and you just have to be very careful about how you express what internally is happening, because you could be very upset or very mad, but you're going to lose them if you start yelling or lecturing or reprimanding. You've already lost that conversation.
Yeah. I want to add to, I think the other piece of this is making it about you. Like you can express your beliefs and how you feel, but we want to make it about, this is how I feel, not how you have to feel, right? This is not your belief. This is my belief, and let me understand. And I want to explain where that's coming from. Now help me understand your belief and where that's coming from. Because when we try to impose it, now we're just stepping on their toes of them becoming independent, right? So now this is about a conversation.
Yeah, and it's also like what you just said, the more you have these conversations where they feel that their opinion really matters, and you're really fostering that just outside of any conversation, then when they're amongst their peers, they sort of have this internal conviction or confidence, and I think then they're less susceptible to being negatively influenced.
Yeah. So let's build on this. So our kids are going, yeah, you know what? You're right. I go to these parties. I don't want to drink, but I feel like I need to drink, or they're going to think I'm a geek, or I need to do this. How do we help equip our kids to combat peer pressure in those situations?
I think part of this is practice, just honestly just practicing with your teen certain scenarios that could come up or ones that they are experiencing. It's a lot easier to respond if you've prepared yourself for those particular incidents or situations. So you can really, I mean, you can role play with them. You can provide, you know, some suggestions or ideas. I think sometimes it's important sometimes to really come down with like a plan. Like if you're in a situation that you are not comfortable with and you want an out, kind of that, and this is where we set that non-judgmental tone. I will come get you, you know, I will help you get out of that situation, no questions asked. I will be there for you. And I know sometimes even parents, teens come up with like code words, so it's not so blatant that they're to their friends that they're telling their parent, get me out of here.
That's key. And Lily, yay, I'm so glad you're back. We missed you.
Sorry about that.
All right. We're like, I hope she comes back. So we're talking about how do we equip our kids with the skills to combat peer pressure when they're in it. And Mary was talking about, and I think this is so important, is to have that plan in place, because in the situation, they're not going to be able to come up with a solution because now they're just in panic mode and I'm just going to go with it. So what else can we do, or what other plans can we put in place to help our kids in those situations?
It sounds like, from what I heard, already a lot of good ideas with having a code word or giving them an out. Also letting them know that if they do mess up and make a mistake, we're still going to be there to support them. So whether that's, hey, if you give me a call in the middle of the night and, you know, I will pick you up, no questions asked. I will ask you questions later and there'll be a discussion later. But in that moment, like I'm not going to be yelling at you, you know, I will be there to help you. And when we make mistakes, you know, I will be there to help you figure out where to go from there. So also kind of demystifying that like fear of failure, because, you know, once someone makes a bad choice, once a teen makes a bad choice, we want to give them a chance to correct that on their own too.
Yeah, I would also add just providing them with their research or researching together about things like you were mentioning, alcohol and substance abuse and DUIs and things like that. So they know sort of like what the risk could be, that it's not, you know, that's what they're up against. That's important too.
That's a challenging one too, Larry, because I think with a lot of things, and I know just in this area, like smoking marijuana, that is something that kids are just like, everyone does it. I don't see what the big point is. Or drinking at parties. Honestly, like they're going, mom and dad are making such a big deal out of this, and everyone does it. And quite frankly, a lot of kids do it. So how do we have that conversation when they're right?
I think it comes down to more than, you know, if a bunch of people are doing it, you know, right and wrong is something that is also going to take a while to develop in their brain. And, you know, regardless of whether or not, you know, a bunch of people are doing it, there are also people that aren't. So figuring out what the other options are, or where those communities might be, or other folks read.
Did you freeze again? Hey, she has such good information.
I'll add to Lily. I think part of it is also you as a parent modeling, you know, practice what you preach. So, I mean, I've had experiences where the teen is saying, my parents smoke marijuana, so what's the big deal? Like, what's the problem here? And you have to really think about like, what are you modeling? And and that's the thing, is teens are certainly going to be paying attention to, if you're saying things, are you backing it up with your own behaviors as well? So you got to model it.
See that with tech use as well. We're on our phones telling them to get off their phones.
Mhm.
That's the positive one, right? I've done that myself. So let's say, and let's go now. So they've gone to a party and we know they've had a drink. And fortunately, they've trusted us to call us because we've had that plan in place. Now what?
And there comes the non-judgmental conversation. I think it's more of, and it's that curiosity, like, how did this kind of come to be? What made you decide? What was going on? Are you know, and also, were you comfortable with this? Was this something like, in a way your gut was not feeling so great about? And just helping them walk through their decision making, what was going on in the situation, understanding that peer influence that potentially is going on, and kind of, again, going back to what's the kind of the values, or what kind of behavior or things that you do want to, how you want to kind of be known, how do you want to be seen by others?
Yeah, and also relating to your own experience, because you were once a teen, you know, had similar experience at parties and things like that. So I think, again, not judging, but deepening the conversation, so that because it'll happen again, so that also they are really at choice, like, did you have a drink because you felt pressure to, or is this something you really wanted to do? So it's kind of helping them distinguish sort of how the decision was made in the moment, and what they want to do it from there.
Yeah. We've got some great questions in here too, and we're going on so I want to make sure we address that. So the first one is, I would appreciate advice on how to assist my teenager boost their self-esteem when they feel their classmates don't want to include them in their circle. So this is almost they're a victim of other peer pressure. How do we help those kids?
Yeah.
I hear this a lot, actually.
I see this all the time, especially when teens are, let's say, moving to a new high school where the cliques are already formed and they're just on the outside. It's brutal. What I've tried to foster for is to look even outside of the school, where there might be organizations or things they can do on the weekends or after school to belong, to connect, to get that. If they're not going to get it in school because it's sort of like closed circle, maybe they can get it elsewhere.
I think that there's that sense of find your tribe. You've got to go find the people that you want to be with, that share interests, share values. And again, yes, you can find those in all kinds of different places. It's a matter of, like, yes, where you go to find them. That's the thing, is if you kind of know what you want and know what you're interested in, especially now with the internet and social media, you can pretty easily find those groups of people. And I think this is a little bit goes with the whole social media, is you want to help your teens consume social media in a positive way. And that can mean connecting with your people with the same interest, who are, passionate about a certain cause, trying to find those connections for themselves.
I find it interesting that you brought up the using social media in a positive way, because I think that's one thing we forget a lot. We look at the negative impacts of it, but I've also seen a lot of positive impacts where kids, just as you were saying, Mary, is that they find their tribe on there, and they're able to, and I've seen a lot of kids who feel so lost and alone that are able to find connections, and it is their saving grace. So I think that we have to be aware of what they're doing and the pros and cons, which leads me into the next question, actually, which is, how do you handle the peer pressure of having a phone? As a family, we've made the decision of not giving our kids a phone until they are 16. The older the 11-year-old gets, the harder that the older they get, the harder it's becoming. Do you have any techniques to handle that?
Well, the phone is such a tough one, because we use it ourselves, so this can be sort of this hypocrisy about, you shouldn't be on your phone. The age is really a personal decision, but I would say having sort of rules, at least, family dinner times, or rules where the sort of family times are protected without technology. I've seen people have technology-free rooms, for example. So I don't know that it's a one size fits all. I think it depends really on the family.
Yeah.
And sometimes if that's the case, and I know that's really, really hard, and I applaud you for trying to hold out. you just sometimes as the parent might have to do a bit more of the legwork, especially if they feel like I can't ever connect with my friends because that's how they talk is on the phone. So you might have to do a little bit extra work of finding ways for your teen to connect with their friends in, you know, in a way that's not with technology.
I would also throw in there needing to be extremely clear with yourself and with your teen on why you're waiting till 16. And again, I applaud that. That's going against the stream. But as Mary and Larry were saying, so much of our kids' lives and their social world, it is on the phone now. And that unfortunately is not something we can change. So it may be looking at what about the phone do you want to protect them from? And are there ways to do that and still give them the ability to be able to connect with their peers? Because I know a lot of kids who have that restriction do feel socially isolated. And that's something we don't want to add that issue to, but I also understand not wanting to give in to this. So it's how do we help them learn a healthy way to manage technology, which now exists. We're not going to get rid of that. So we want to teach them to use it in a healthy way, which we can't necessarily do if they don't have any access to it as well. So I think it's really thinking about what are the things you want to protect them from, do that, but also be very clear. Someone said I gave into phones for calls, texting to be connected with friends, but not giving into social media until 16. That might be a really good solution, right? So it's really, and it's having that connection and that ongoing conversation. And Mary, I'm going to hand it back over to you for that. I get very passionate about this, so I don't want to jump in. So go ahead, Mary. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm sorry, on the phone?
Oh, yeah, on the phone and like the social media. And I think also let's just go into the influence and back to the peer pressure, which I believe is part of why we're trying to restrict the amount of social media. How do we protect them from the influence of social media, which is a form of peer pressure?
Absolutely. Part of it is, again, like just kind of questioning, wondering, asking them about what they like to look at, what, you know, who are they following, all those kinds of questions, just kind of about what it is, and getting an idea of like, why are you so interested in, you know, this particular person, or this particular cause. So and again, it really circles back to the more healthy consumption of social media, where it's not just mindless scrolling or just, you know, getting into that pattern of comparison all the time. In some ways, it's like, how do you use social media with kind of goals and things in mind of what you're trying to do instead of just to be on it?
Yeah, I would echo that, having conversations about their experience on social media, what they're getting out of it, you know, whether it's a blogger or a Tumblr or whatever that is. And then, yeah, really understanding what they're drawn to there. And also, you know, I have a lot of teens that I coach where they come home from school and there's the first hour and a half, it's just mindless, right? It's just kind of to kill time. And sort of having that conversation about, like Mary said, intentionality. And is that really what you want to do? Because sometimes they don't even want to do that. It's just because they're bored or things like that. So it's like, opens up a conversation. What else would you want to be doing if, you know, again, like choosing, are you really choosing this thing, or are you just sort of like an addiction a little bit?
Yeah, I've heard that a lot too, Larry, where they're like, I really don't even enjoy this. I just don't know what else to do. And because they're used to that dopamine rush, it's hard to find other things that give them that same satisfaction. So it is filling that and helping them find other things that are more effective. There's Lily again. Yay. So Lily, we're talking about the influence of social media as a form of peer pressure, and how do we protect our kids against that?
I'm in a different office now, different computer. So we're going to see if this works better. So yeah, with social media, I think it can be really tempting to want to put restrictions on. And I think that's kind of a place where we have to choose our battles as parents, is to say, you know, is this what is going to be safe and what's unsafe? So it also depends on age, I think, too, of your teen, especially as they're getting older and especially if they haven't had any kind of boundaries or restrictions on social media before, that's going to be more tricky. But being, whether that's okay, for safety, I need to be having like your login information, but also making sure that we're not imposing that as a, as a punishment before anything's happened. So, if your teen has been safe and you don't have any, concerns about their social media usage, not necessarily a need. However, if they have a history of being unsafe or making unsafe choices, even having a collaboration like, hey, what do you think appropriate restrictions are for social media, or our expectations for social media? Even just going over like how to block someone, how to mute someone, how to know what's a safe link to click on and what's not. Starting from an educational perspective, maybe even more collaborative, and only using boundaries or restrictions as again, at least tell them that it's happening. Usually have reasons why. Don't just kind of jump to that immediately as oh, I'm worried that there could be something out there.
That's good. Let's dig a little bit more into, our kids have now made a really poor decision based on peer pressure. Well, my friends were doing it, right? That's a really, or the one that I hear a lot from kids, well, everyone else's parents let them do it. Has anybody ever heard that? Everyone else's, the whole world, yeah. Whole world, except for you. How do we address that one? Silence. It's that easy. It's that easy to address, right?
Well,
Go
just
ahead,
like with
Lily.
any other hard conversation, you can start it with like hey, I'm kind of nervous about having this conversation with you because, I want to come at this with, respect, but also we need to acknowledge that, we made a choice that wasn't healthy, or that wasn't, a safe choice for us to make. And also kind of letting them, hearing what they're saying, whether or not you agree with it. So saying, I hear you say you felt like everyone else was doing it, or you feel like all the other parents let their kids do it, at least reflecting that back to them. You don't have to agree, but letting them know that you're hearing what they're saying and hearing them out, because ultimately they probably know what they did was wrong, whether they're going to admit that to you or whether, they're going to be able to have that conversation with you. At this point in their life is a whole other story.
Yeah. That part of reflecting back is so important, because I think our knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, I don't care what other parents have to say, or it doesn't matter, or they don't. And that's just going to shut your kid down immediately, going, well, you don't understand, you're the uncool parent, right? So if it's about what you were saying about understanding their perspective and why it's so important to them, and listening, because they might even have a really good reason and go, okay, maybe there's a compromise here, or maybe there's a way for me to explain to you why it's important, because my job is to protect you. Do you guys have any other thoughts to that, Mary or Larry? I like saying your names side by side.
I would add, I also understand that there's a sense of like, I don't want my kid to just get off spot, scot-free with, because of making these like bad or against kind of our values or our rules kind of decisions. So it's important, if you have, if there are going to be consequences, it's also important to have these conversations ahead before the thing happens. Like you need to set that kind of those boundaries and understandings ahead of time.
Yeah, and I would just add sort of, that you're not going to be able to have these conversations, or they won't have an impact unless there's connection there. So kind of always monitoring that in the background is, I think, the baseline.
That is a very big one, because none of these conversations will have much weight if you don't have a connection with them. That is very true. And Mary, I want to reiterate to what you said about doing it beforehand. So if they've made a mistake and you've never talked about it, it's easy to assume they should have known better, but that's kind of an unfair thing. So it's about, okay, we've made the mistake. Let's talk about it, why you made that decision. What can you do moving forward? And here's a consequence if it happens again. And that way, now you're setting them up to succeed and make better choices, rather than punishing for a bad choice that they may not have had any idea about, which just sets them up to be angry at you, and it's kind of unfair. So I think it's really about looking forward, not looking back, and make that all about that. Peer pressure. When is peer pressure good for our kids? And how do we get more of that?
I mean, there is a plethora of good peer pressure. I think it's about those, those good behaviors or those good values that you would like to see in your teen. So it could be about making good grades. It could be about working really hard at your sport. Or really following your inspiration, or things that you really believe in, or causes that you want to believe in. I think it's encouragement for them to be connected to those things. And I mean, part of it is the party that you keep with, so kind of keeping an eye on who are the people that your team is hanging out with. And I think sometimes it might just be a balance. Like there's going to be friends you do not like, but if there's at least that one or two people that you feel like have a good influence on your team, then that's certainly better than nothing.
I think it's important to realize too that the good influence that you just mentioned can also have a dark side, where kids feel pressure to do all of this because they're kids, they do. So I see the anxiety and everything that happens because of that, or parents wanting to push on that peer pressure and throw it on them themselves to encourage them to do it, which is dangerous territory as well. So I just want to put, even when it's the thing that you want them to do, we've got to still talk about peer pressure the same way, because it can still have that negative impact when it becomes comparison, right? I want one more question and then we're running up on time. What if your kid is the one doing the peer pressure ring?
Well, you could come at it like also getting curious about that, like, what are they trying to get out of that? Why are they doing that? Just from a place of curiosity and non-judgment, to really try to understand what the motivation is behind it.
I think also is, teens tend to be sometimes pretty self-centered and focused. So I think it's exploring. They might not even realize exactly what they're doing, and kind of walking that through with them, to that more of involving more of that empathy of like how this could be affecting some other person, or what their experience might be because of whatever your team's doing.
So I want to go around one time and just ask you guys, and then we're going to do a quick poll. Val, do you want to put the poll in the chat right now so people can do that? There it is. And then if you guys can each go, we'll start with Mary, then Larry, then Lily. Give us one main takeaway or action item that each of us can do after this session.
Encourage your child or teen in your life to explore who they are, and help them in positive ways, because that is actually going to be a very protective factor against peer pressure. If you're giving them a good foundation for exploring their own identity, their own beliefs, what causes they are interested in.
How about that?
Yeah, I would say really, really think about your relationship with them as a partnership, negotiate the relationship for them almost as an adult, so that they can already practice feeling empowered inside the household, and then they'll take that on the outside as well.
That's a good one too, Lynn.
I'd say these are all the topics that, covered in these different, presentations, and especially peer pressure. They can be really scary topics, for us as parents to even think about, or think about how we approach them. So I like to say, it's only as scary as we make them. So if we approach these topics, it's okay to be scared. We just got to do it scared. Have the conversations, have the difficult ones, have the scary ones, because avoiding it, or pretending like it doesn't exist, is going to kind of feed into that fear, make it scarier, make it harder to talk about. So even just coming to a meeting like this, having this kind of conversation, demystifying it, making it less scary, we're already on the right path.
Love that. I want to add one more if I can too, is allow your kids to say no at home. When your kids are allowed to self-advocate and say no and set their boundaries at home, including with you, that is when they learn to say no to their peers. And that has been really tightly connected. So when we never let our kids win or say no or set their boundaries, I've heard those kids go, well, I didn't know I could say no because I'm not allowed to do it at home. So please let them self-advocate at home without getting in trouble for it.
That's a great one.
Yeah. All right, Val, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Thank you guys so much. Please, in the comments, in the chat, send your thanks to Larry and Mary and Lily. You guys were phenomenal and so much wise help here. I know this was a really tough topic, so we really appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam. Thank you to all of our speakers. What a, another great topic, and really am proud that we can share these resources with parents. And I love this lunchtime lunch and learn thing. So you can just have your sandwich and have some lunch and really listen to some great panelists. So thank you so much. We will do this again in March, so we're going to try to stick to the same schedule. You'll get some information about this particular panel in your email probably on Tuesday, just with some resources, and then we will be back with our next panel in March. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Great weekend, everyone. It's supposed to snow.